So good morning. The Friday morning crew is back again with a discussion of chronic heavy metal and the problems that produces and what you can do about it. And this is a big problem with our children nowadays. And the two ladies I have on with me for these discussions have a whole lot of experience and are very, very worth listening to. So welcome to Brittany O'Neill, mother of 3 boys, 2 of which are on the spectrum and 1 who is seriously autistic. She homeschools them, she chelates them with the Andy Cutler protocol, and she chelates herself. And Sandra Gentry, an Army wife, mother of 3 boys and raiser of organic chickens, and a national board certified and wellness coach. She's homeschooled for the past 12 years and has brought her boys from being sick to being whole healthy all by herself. She is also chelating herself with the Andy Cutler protocol and has coached people at chelationcoach.com since 2019. So we chose diet and gut health as our topic to kick off today. And many people think that finding the right diet and healing the gut is the beginning and end for recovery. But in our community, we have found that heavy metals are an underlying cause for gut problems. Toxic children and toxic adults, too, almost inevitably have digestion problems. The metals directly cause inflammation in the gut, and they also suppress those aspects of the immune system that are supposed to control parasites and yeast. So, Brittany, let's kick off with you. Can you tell us something about what you've had to deal with gut problems and what you learned about it, chelating your children and chelating yourself too? And how has that worked out for you?
So chelated for my kids. My 14-year-old has always been constipated, like infant, toddler, all the way just until a couple of years ago. And nothing we did like before ACC ever worked. You'd use, those Miralax, all that stuff that we shouldn't be using. We used a lot of that, and it's like a Band-Aid. It works in the moment, and then the next time, they're constipated again and again and again and again. And those toxins sit there and make them crazy, make them very unwell, because it sits and it's like.
How does that manifest when a child's so young? Oh, sorry. When your child's young, so young they can't really express themselves, what kind of behaviors do you see from the being constipated?
Just like very just uncomfortable in their skin. Like you can tell they're just like afraid to move, because it's just like so like trapped feeling like inside their body. So he'd just be like, he'd sit in one place, or he'd just want to sit and watch a movie and just be still. And and then when it was time to go to the bathroom, it'd just be torture, and he'd scream and be upset, and it was just torture. And we could never, in 2018 he was 10 when the first time we touched this. And so for those first 10 years of his life, it was just torture. Nothing we did was a reasonable solution beyond, that one time fix. And then you'd have to take it again for the next time you go to the bathroom. So, so once we started the Core 4, I chose magnesium citrate for him. And the magnesium citrate was like an instant fix. All of a sudden he had no issues, and he could go to the bathroom, and he didn't need help, and he wasn't, bothered or upset. And it was, just the Core 4 alone changed a lot for him. And probiotics were great. I feel like he always needed like more GSE than the other children did in the beginning. Like whatever was going on in there was just like brutal.
That's grapefruit seed extract for people who don't know. Yeah. So he had I think that the dysbiosis was contributing terribly to some people it gives diarrhea, and then other people it causes constipation. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like diarrhea is horrible. But just for like once, like he needed it just so that he could flush out all that stuff that was just stuck inside his body. And, it changed a lot for him because he wasn't uncomfortable. He wasn't, holding it because he was dreading it. And it was a big change for him. My little one, he doesn't have like the same kind of issues. He does have a lot of yeast. He is super yeasty. He bounces off the walls. He gets angry and irritable, and you can tell. It's funny because, once you start dealing with children and yeast, you're like, you're yeasty. Let's go find, we don't use GSC for him. He's a phenol sensitive, so he uses Pal de Arco. But we're like, yes, you need another half capsule. Yes, you need another capsule in your next dose. Because it's really like it's a simple fix. Yes, our vitamins are band-aids right now because chelation is the solution. But it's like in these moments when we're chelating and these things are extra irritated, those supplements are like a lifeline,
Life-saving.
especially with yeast, because yeast is wild and creates horrible symptoms. I mean, it makes it to the point where he won't sit down and do his schoolwork if I do not have it under control. He gets wild. And so we do the Pau de Arco, and I use Golden Seal for him right now. It's just like it's a boost to the Pau de Arco, and then his probiotics at the end of the day, and he's a whole lot calmer. He mellows out pretty quickly once we get that first supplement in the morning. You look like you're gonna say something, Sandra. Go ahead.
Yes. When you want to, when you consider that yeast produces carbon dioxide and alcohol as part of its normal metabolism, can you imagine expecting somebody who's impaired to make good decisions? Like this whole, they're bouncy, they're hyperactive, their concentration goes down the drain because they're just thinking about, oh, their brain's hijacked.
Yep,
And their
exactly what it is.
little yeast cells are like, oh, eat more carbs. The carb cravings is something I always point out. They're the white food eaters. Mashed potatoes, rice, white rice, fresh. You're like, if you cool that rice down, you have a low GI food again, like low glycemic index. But if they just eat it warm and just ready to go, it's like, it's just sugar. It's just your blood sugar is going to spike again. So they crave, the potato chips, the this, the that. And my youngest is a lot like this. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you just love all the white foods and the high carb foods. And his dad
Does
is
he have
like
a tendency to be yeasty even after chelating so many years, Sandra?
The youngest, I want to say I chelated the least amount of rounds because he was so little and he responded really well. And after about 2 years, I was like, kid can talk, he's fine, he's whatever, we're no longer dealing with the spectrum. He's very, literally from having 5 syllables, monosyllabic words to telling me a whole factual thing of what he sees and what happened and what's going on. Like, I'm like, this is like the holy grail for me, where I'm like, okay. And now I'm looking at, okay, the self-regulation, the easily thrown off balance when he's hurt, either in feelings or bodily, where he's the one to, okay, you would say the sensitive kid. And I'm like, okay, there's some fine tuning we can do, but even when we're doing rounds, it's no worse than in between rounds. It's just, I notice it and I'm like, okay, is this yeast or is this just his preferred food? It's just when it's really bad, I notice it. I'm like, you know what? I don't want you to get sick the day after Halloween. Let's not eat all the candy tonight, that sort of thing, And that is common even for kids not on the spectrum, because sugar just lowers, what the immune system can do. And then they catch just about every bug out there because it's typically cool in North America this time of year.
How do you handle Halloween?
How do I handle Halloween? When we were more in the trenches, when I started chelating with my oldest, I bought what I considered safe candy. We're talking little gluten-free small things. And then we swapped it so he wouldn't feel deprived. And the other thing was, I did parcel it out, because just giving it to a kid that has poor self-regulation is like a recipe for disaster. You know, and I myself am like this. I can eat a bar of chocolate. It can take me 2 months. I'm just taking a bite here and another week, another bite. I'm good with that. So I'm trying to model that for my children. Like, you can have, you know, one piece of candy after dinner. We're not going to go hog wild here, or even, you know, whatever, 4 or 5 pieces, but you're not going to get this whole big bag. And then all I find is the evidence of you having unpacked the candy. Like, we're not doing that anymore. And, yeah, I think we've just kept that one, and now it's like, okay, we've even done another thing where we sorted out this is the really bad one, like, just let's sort it out. I think we've done something like taken things and said we can bake with these, like, I don't know, Snickers or something. You can cut them up and let's make them into an ingredient of something else. You know, we're not taking them away and tossing them in the trash, but we're taking it out of this channel of you just gorging on candy, basically, and the sugar. So
What about Brittany? Brittany, what do you do for Halloween with your kids?
Usually they get a week to enjoy it, whatever it is. They can have a few a day. They get a week and then it goes away.
Then you just make it all disappear. So like,
Mm.
what is
I mean,
everybody
they're
get sick a week later?
No, they're 12 and 14. So I mean, it's like it's a very basic explanation, and they understand. And the little one, he'll get like one candy that night, and if he sees them get a candy during the week, then I'll give him one, but I really have to limit him, just because we didn't introduce candy to him till he was like 5. So when we give him sweets, it usually wreaks havoc on his digestive system, which is fine, because then I know, just don't give it to him at all. Yeah, I'm not big on the whole candy thing, and this year I tried to talk them out of trick-or-treating and said, well, we could just watch scary movies and I'll go buy you whatever candy you want at the store and you can have that and we can move on.
Yeah. Okay. How did they accept that? Did that go down well as a concept?
Yeah, I mean, they're already asking me when can we put the Christmas tree up, so I'm like, we can just do right past Halloween if you want. I don't care. Yeah.
the store displays are helping you, huh?
Oh yes, always.
So
They always have suggestions for how they can help me or me do something for them, you know.
what do you think the difference is between, I mean, because these kids all have adrenal problems and they all have yeast problems or dysbiosis problems of some sort. And both of those things cause a lot of symptoms. And sometimes it's hard to distinguish what's going on with what's one and what's the other. I mean, how do you differentiate between yeast and adrenal issues? How do you know that it's one or not the other? Like, you know, like I got to give this child a dose of adrenal cortex rather than a dose of grapefruit
The
seed
adrenals
extract.
need some carbs, but they usually do better with complex carbs or carbs paired with the protein to, you know, slow down the rise of blood glucose and kind of stabilize that.
Right.
So the adrenals need sugar. So it's like, you can't just say, oh, we'll go keto. I mean, I wouldn't recommend that for a child anyway, but you can't just totally remove carbs and think that'll help with the yeast, because you're having the downside of causing stress elsewhere. So I think behaviorally there are different profiles. Yes, there's a tiny bit of overlap with maybe the whiny and kind of hyperactive type stuff, but adrenal stress is more like, one is less energy, like they tire out, like physical activity, they don't seem to bounce back as fast as other kids, they can't play as long, like the endurance is impaired, I want to say. So you have, and then the other thing is it's more of a, the emotional side is more on the weepy side, I want to say.
Oh yes, meltdown over everything.
Everything is, oh my God, Mom, you looked at me. Why do you ask me and not my brother? Like, why do you know, just this very, very fragile kind of mimosa type. I'm going to just wilt here. And whereas yeast is, I'm bouncy, I'm happy, but I can't focus on what you want me to focus on.
Yes,
so those are like the very extreme stereotypes of what that looks like. And then symptoms wise that you can observe. I mean, those red clown lips on a child with yeast overgrowth is very obvious once you're aware of that. It's this dry ring around here, and it's at a pretty bad stage at that point. It's kind of like
Yes.
when babies have a diaper rash and it's just a red ring around the anus. It's like that kid's not feeling good. So, you know, it's one end of the digestive system and the other end. It looks the same. I mean, what else? And then the food cravings, I think, are more pronounced with yeast. With adrenal stress, it's sometimes like, oh, I don't want to eat. I don't know. It kind of a bit more unpredictable in that area. The other thing with adrenal stress is that once you do give adrenal cortex, and you're like, even if you're wrong on saying, oh, maybe you need some more adrenal support, if that does not help within like 15 to 30 minutes,
Yeah.
follow it with the antifungal and say, actually, it's the yeast. Because in my experience, a good amount of, a sufficient amount of adrenal cortex takes care of this. Oh, my kid is crying because I looked at him. He
Yeah.
thinks I looked at him funny when I asked him to do a chore kind of a thing. Okay, so that is super adrenal. Like, they're overreacting. They're not sleeping well. They have their allergic shiners. That's another visible thing.
Or
You know,
they
even with decent sleep hours, they still have these allergic shiners. They don't have a runny nose where you would think, oh, it's because their sinuses are clogged and that's why they have these shiners. It's just, and they're miserable. They're just a more, I don't want to say grumpy, but they're kind of the, you know, they're more downtrodden, where yeast is just, you're between bouncy and zoned out, like between
My
those
mother,
poles.
my mother used to talk about children just getting overtired, and that's
Yeah.
what, yeah.
And that's adrenal too. It can look like that too, where
Adrenals.
they're tired, wired at night,
Yeah.
especially,
So
or even
tired
for
they can't even go to
for
sleep. Yeah, yeah.
right. They're
Yeah.
so, their mind is like they're coming up with worst case scenarios and what if, and it's
Oh,
like,
yeah.
whew, have
So
some adrenal cortex.
Brittany, I'm going to ask Brittany this question. What do you think is the difference between how the yeast problems manifest, behaviorally in your kids and in you as an adult? How does it look different? And adrenal problems for that matter too.
I feel like yeast creates brain fog, and so it makes it so that the kids can't concentrate, or they're like you want them to all sit down and do their schoolwork, and then they're just like all over the house. And my
Bouncing
favorite
off the walls with
phrase,
brain fog too, huh?
oh my gosh, they're just like, Mom, I don't know what I'm doing. Mom, can you explain this? Mom, I just don't get this video. And then but you're not sitting in your chair looking at it. You're like in the kitchen, and then you're in the living room, and you stop talking to your brother, and it's chaos. It's like, and I stop and I think, and I'm like, okay, what vitamin do you need more of right now? But yeah, I mean, it creates concentration issues, and they can't sit down and do their work. And then they just can't concentrate on the very fact that they need to be in control of their being. And then I feel like it also creates like communication issues, because they're just crazy.
They're not totally in there.
Yeah, they're not completely present. They've got, all the digestives going crazy, and that goes up into their brain, and we don't get a lot of schoolwork done those days. So I feel like we have like some form of communication problem, because they're just so dysregulated in
And
their
when you're face to face with that situation, like, and your kids are just like off the wall and brain fogged at the same time and not doing what you want them to do, what's your first instinct to give them or to do?
When they're just off the walls, the first thing I go for is calming supplements first.
Calming supplements, yeah, like
Anything calming, theanine. We really like lemon balm these days. Anything to just stop them in the moment, so that they can, regroup and calm down.
Does it work really well?
It does work really well. If I give my youngest one enough theanine, he just like,
How much
it
is
just
enough?
stops.
One of those little capsules, like from now. How many of those do you give him?
What are those, like 100 milligrams? He could probably take 2 or 3 of those a day if I divide it between all of his vitamin doses for the day.
You give one, and then if you give another if it's not okay.
Exactly. Exactly. If we're, if something isn't quite right and you can very clearly see it, I'll have to make a second round of vitamins for the morning
But if it's
just to get him to
adrenal,
stop.
the adrenal cortex, works pretty quick.
It's a very quick one. And you know what? My oldest ones take capsules. My little one is a special circumstance where I have to make them into candy because that is the only way he will take them. So I have to buy high quality baking chocolate and turn his vitamins into candy. And I know Jan is like, don't do that, but it's the only way they'll go down, and they work.
You have
It
to
works.
do.
It's unconventional, but for now it works. And so I spend time in the kitchen every morning making vitamins, and it drives me crazy. But if he does not take them, he will not be a functional member of the family for the day. He will just be all over the place, and I won't be able to go anywhere, run errands, make a phone call without chaos in my house. So,
Mother necessity.
oh my
Can you use
goodness.
some other form of sugar? Like, I think stevia, I think they all taste horrible. The only thing that tastes good is sugar.
They really do. And he takes his 4 vitamins a day, that or his 4, sets of vitamins that way. And I use like something I can buy at the fancy health store, their chocolate chips. So they're like all allergen free, no added sugar or something like that, or very little sugar. So it's not adding to his burden. And even if it is, it's enough vitamin, it's enough like yeast support that it overpowers whatever was in it, because he needs all those other things that are in that vitamin. Like they're
put
a
the
necessity.
grapeseed seed extract into the candy?
He uses Pau d'Arco, so no.
The Pau
And thank
d'Arco.
goodness, because GSE is a very horrible tasting vitamin.
Okay, so the Pau d'Arco
Yeah.
goes into the candy
The
too?
Pau d'Arco does go in. They all do.
Whole
All the
thing,
herbal
yeah.
ones, he still takes it. I don't know how.
How old is this child?
8. This is a
8.
little one.
What about you, Sandra? What would you do in a would you go for
If
the
I
L-theanine
think
too?
that it's yeast related, then I go straight for just clinic acid. I'm like, take this. Like, here's the water, here's the pill. I'm right there to have them not, oh my, or so
Cyclinic
it's just.
acid.
And the other thing is, and I've found myself doing that actually this week, going back into more of a rhythm. We took a bit of a vacation here a couple of weeks ago and getting back into the rhythm. So now I'm like, okay, I need the theanine so I can show up calm as the instructor here while homeschooling, because how I am here, I can respond smoother to whatever comes up. If they're like, oh, I don't want to, I can, it helps when I stay calm. Let's put it that
So
way.
you've been
So
dosing
I
yourself.
use it as a preventative, like knowing I'm going into a high stakes situation and I want to be calm, I will grab the theanine. It's a non-drowsy anxiolytic. I love it. It's like, okay, I don't want to stress out. I don't want to, get all flabbergasted here.
You find
So
that
that
you, that you need more and more? Do you build up a resistance to it, or is it just work well all the time, no matter what?
Ondociclinic acid is very specific to yeast. I haven't used it to the point of, daily, twice a day for X amount of months that I could say, oh, it's losing potency. I've used it more. And I didn't find it early on when when I was chelating all 3. It was further into this, just looking for something that's not GSE, but that works.
So it doesn't kill off the other stuff, it just gets the yeast?
Yes, it is specific to yeast, whereas GSE is a broad spectrum antimicrobial. And my oldest turned, like literally, it was his little red ruddy cheeks, and he used to get them a lot anyway, and I didn't know why. And until I learned about chelation and dug more into the biochemistry, but him taking GSE, I used the drops at the time. I don't even remember how I gave it to him. I think I put it in water just to dilute it, and maybe some grapefruit juice because I love grapefruit juice. But the tips of his ears would literally turn red, like boom, like a little traffic light red. And I'm like, this
That's
is
a
odd.
phenol
Like,
reaction. That's a reaction to the
yes.
chemical.
GSE is high in phenols, and typically we say, oh, this health food is good and antioxidants. It's because it has a lot of polyphenols. It's like, okay, same class of chemicals. If your liver is so impacted by mercury, it does not break down these things properly, and it just causes other reactions throughout the body. Anyway, so I went on the quest for what is good, what is a good antifungal, more specific and low phenol. And Pota Arco, I don't know, I felt like it was super weak and didn't do a whole lot for my kids. So I'm like, whatever,
It is pretty
try
weak.
that, check that. Next one, please. And I ended up with, I think quite a few parents actually use caprylic acid, which is a lot of times derived. You will see it on like coconut type labels where it's like contains, caprylic acid. Then you have butyric acid, which GABA is gamma aminobutyric acid. It's a calming neurotransmitter in the brain, and in the belly, it's a calming thing too, and it's an antifungal. And then you have undeciclinaic acid. So in that order, you go from weakest to strongest antifungal action. And the undeciclinaic acid, I'm like, this is it. Like, boom, it works.
You take it for yourself too? Do you use it yourself?
Okay, like I said, it's not every day. It's like, okay, I'm like, how am I feeling? What's
When you
going
need
on?
it, you take
Am
it
I
as
finding
needed.
myself gravitating to the carbs over and over? I'm like, oh, I don't want that. So let's stop. Let's take the antifungal and make a different food choice. Both.
Okay. So you take it in as needed. You don't have to.
Yes, very much so these days.
Yeah,
Like
because
on around, I'm like, oh yeah, I need someone.
well, you're far advanced in the chelation thing, so it's just like when the problem comes up. But for some people at the beginning, it's just perennial, and they have to be.
And you can use it on a daily
adequate.
basis. There is, because it is specific to yeast, I think there is much less of an issue taking it longer term.
Okay.
And then if you run into the problem of absolute resistance of the yeast, that you still have those yeast symptoms, or you think it's yeast symptoms, I like to tell people, evaluate, is it a yeast symptom? Could it be something else? And if you conclude, yes, it is a yeast symptom, you've maxed out on that antifungal, you drop that antifungal, you put it in the back of your cupboard, and you move on. You pick a different one agent supplement and use that as your antifungal, find
Well,
your
that
right
was the
dose there.
advice Andy gave, certainly, because otherwise you build up.
I'm a purist.
If you rotate those things, you get all kinds of resistance problems.
That's how labs create multi-agent resistancy, by just throwing a whole bunch of stuff at an organism, and the survivors,
Yes, and
the inevitable survivors, are then multi-agent resistant, and then you have a really big problem. Yeah.
Well, let's not do that in our households.
Exactly. So one type, one that's why I say just one agent, one whatever. There are a bunch of supplements that have, antifungal supplement, and it's got herbs and a little bit of this acid and a little bit of that. And it's like, do you know what works? Do you know what you react to? If it doesn't work, like it's a crap shot kind of a thing. And it's causing that problem in the long run.
And that's why we tell people, watch out for those multi-product vitamins and whatever it is, except Andy used to like the multi adaptogen things, yeah. And the
B complex is kind of a combo that some people even react to that, where it's like, okay,
the multi adaptogens ones always make me a little nervous because there's so many different herbs in there. And herbs are, usually if you're going to react to something, if a person's going to react to something, it's usually an herbal, because you don't know what they're,
I like reishi. I figured that out. And I think it might have been in a combo thing, but I really like reishi, and I like my maitake. I don't like shiitake. It's like, okay, even there I go with the single item type thing.
Yeah. Safer to do that. What is the reishi like for you? What do you use it for?
More energy. Like used consistently. It's a clean kind of all day energy, and it doesn't kick in for me anyway within just that day of taking it. It's got to be several weeks And then I notice if I then skip it, I'm like, oh, looking back before I started, yeah, I have more energy.
I like the stuff
Just
that
go to the
kicks in
time of year I need it.
immediately, like adrenal cortex. Like that's the wonderful stuff. And I wish that more parents knew about it because it would make their lives a whole hell of a lot easier, if they
When they
knew.
think their kid's just being difficult, yeah, it's the kids not feeling good, so they're
Or
acting
like
a certain way. Right, both. You're right.
as an adult, because I never chelated my kids. They all grew up, sort of before all this stuff happened. And it was just me and people that I deal with. And when I feel like freaked out or I'm getting all nervous or sorry, I can't sleep or whatever, boy, adrenal cortex is wonderful stuff.
Mhm. It's a lifesaver.
Yeah. And very few people know about it. Yeah.
It's like our thing. What are we known for? Andy Cutler, ACE, ACC. It's like it slides up
Andy
in this
Cutler,
A.
ACC, and ACE, and it's been a bit of a misnomer to call it ACE, which refers to adrenal cortex extract, because that was a product which is no longer legal anymore. I think it was before doctors invented hydrocortisone.
Hydrocortisone.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. It makes sense though. And
So it
now
was
we
an
just say it's
entirely
the D.
different product, and you can't even get it
Okay.
anymore. And
Right.
it was probably, and that's what they used before for people who had adrenal insufficiency before there was hydrocortisone. And I
Right.
guess it worked pretty well, but we call we in our community we started calling adrenal cortex ACE, and that's a little confusing because it's adrenal cortex, which is a desiccated,
It's defatted. I
defatted,
think it
yeah,
says on there defatted, desiccated. Yeah, it's a
defatted, which
already
takes out the
processed.
hormones apparently. It just gives, and it's just the adrenal cortex, and it gives the ingredients that the adrenal
The
glands,
basic building blocks. Yeah.
yeah, need to do their stuff. And it's just the adrenal cortex and not the adrenal medulla, which tends to make these little kids produce adrenaline, which you really don't want to have to happen. No adrenaline, please. We got enough.
I think I've done this before
L-theanine.
where if these are the adrenals, this is the adrenal cortex, this is the medulla, and this is where adrenaline is made. And so if you have
Outside, the cortex is in the middle. I thought it was the
the
outside.
cortex is in the center, yes.
Okay.
The cortex is kind of, think of core, it's the inner
Okay.
part, it's the cortex. This is where hydrocortisone is made. I mean, not sorry, cortisol.
Yeah.
Cortisol. Hydrocortisone is the closest analog we have in the medical world as
Yeah.
far as short life.
Yeah.
I mean, half-life goes. It's got the shortest half-life of all the steroids. And defatted, I'm just thinking cholesterol is a precursor for steroid hormones. So it makes sense that once you strip the fat off of the gland, you're left with the raw tissue, the whatever other tissue that makes up the adrenal gland. Yeah.
Well, just if this video is going out there into the ether, and any beleaguered parent that is wondering, what to do about these difficult to manage children, and if there's a good tip, learn about adrenal cortex, learn about L-theanine, learn about what yeast looks like, and I hope we're helping you here. Yeah.
And if you're already looking at heavy metals, those are just the aces in your pocket while you're chipping away at the heavy metal stores that caused this problem to begin with.
Yeah, you're just managing all this stuff while you correct the basic underlying situation, because this is all caused by heavy metals, and it's usually mercury. Though lead is really implicated in digestive issues, since we started talking about digestive issues. Brittany,
And it makes
have you been chelating for lead, Brittany? Oh, sorry, but let's get Brittany have a word. I want to see what she has to say about that.
For myself, I have most of my rounds were DMSA combo. And after a year and a half of that, that finally caught up with me, and I've spent the last 2 months trying to get my viral load back down. I keep getting sick. So I did last round only ALA and I had sleep issues. So I feel like my body does want the DMSA back. I might try it again next week. But yeah, I do. Most of my rounds are lead. I don't do it as much for the kids, but I'll tell you what, going from ALA only to adding DMSA for a nonverbal child is a huge, huge deal. That is where the lack of speaking is coming from.
Really, like you think that it has to do with lead?
I
I
wanted
don't
to say this earlier,
like
where mercury and lead combined make, okay, so if you have a little bit of mercury, maybe no outward symptoms of any kind of anything on the spectrum, but you add lead, it magnifies, it blows it out the roof,
Yeah, we
what
know.
that looks like. And lead and mercury in an Egyptian study, I want to say it was Egyptian, were implicated in the more severe form of nonverbal autism versus autism to pushing it all the way to nonverbal autism. My youngest, my youngest, very pure mercury type of symptoms as a nonverbal, non-responsive to being called and all this. ALA unleashed his tongue. I mean, it was this oral and motor control that he just immediately gained, and it was purely ALA. So I'm thinking it's more
Motor
of what
control thing, or was it a
DMSA.
brain thing? Was it a, well,
It was
that is,
oral motor control to me, which is neurologically
yeah,
controlled. So it was his oral motor control that just was hampered by mercury, I believe, because if it's sitting on nerves, on cranial nerves, and if it's disrupting how these things fire, and if you can't control it, if you can't make that connection,
can't make your tongue work.
this isn't gonna happen. Exactly. Feeding. I mean, it wasn't just speaking, it was feeding, it was all of that. That was oral motor control.
Those babies
People go to,
latch on.
speech therapists and feeding therapy and all these things, and I'm like, it was like a switch. I mean, it was during his very first round, and it was ALA, a teeny tiny dose for a teeny tiny person.
So it was
And so
100% mercury.
absolutely, just the way he looked, the behaviors, all of it was, he was the pure kind of, this is what it looks like in a very young child.
As
Yes.
for the uninitiated here, the lipoic acid, I mean, it's specific to mercury and a few other things.
Arsenic
It's
too.
mostly
Yeah.
arsenic too, but mostly we think of mercury, and it's a fat soluble chelator which cleans out the brain, whereas DMSA is used for lead. It's used traditionally for lead in regular medical practice too.
And the other thing is that DMSA plus ALA makes those symptoms during round a little bit easier. Maybe that's why you sleep better. To me, ALA is energizing too. And
Yeah.
do you remember? I don't know if you had issues with sleep before chelation, Brittany, but mine was like this, the typical adrenal thing of, oh, I'm tired, I want to go to sleep, but it's getting later and later because I'm not getting to sleep. And then the sleep is kind of non-restful. You wake up in the middle of the night. I woke up several times. I had to go to use the restroom, and I was just annoyed about sleep interruptions, and I woke up kind of groggy. So that was pre-chelation. And with chelation, despite those interruptions of taking a chelator in the middle of the night several times, I actually had better quality sleep, I think. And I still do. But it
I've never
can
had sleep issues.
itself can kick in the insomnia more, I think, because you're moving mercury. So you're amplifying those symptoms during that round. You're actually the ALA is energizing, and B, you're moving mercury. So both, I think, can contribute to those sleep problems on round.
Yeah, I never had sleep issues ever, I don't think. I've always been a sleeper. But when I combo, I have no issues sleeping and waking up with my alarm. And the one time I did an ALA only, I slept through every single alarm. I don't know what, if my subconscious was awake. It's like we're not missing any doses. I'd wake up 15 minutes after the alarm. I'd wake up 30 minutes after the alarm. So I never actually missed anything, but I missed every single alarm in the middle of the night. I'm like, I feel like I'm just going to go back to DMSA and I'm just going to have to deal with it.
How to get on, but it's affecting your immune system.
Yeah, it is.
I say, yeah. I was
How
wondering since
what
I
is your
got this.
dosage of DMSA with those combo rounds? Do you have wiggle room to lower that a slight bit? So
To
say
bring
I still have
DMSA
DMSA.
Lower the dosage, yeah.
on the DMSA, yeah, I probably should. I think I'm at like 18 and a half or 20 right now. Not high, not very high, but I could probably come down a little bit. Yeah, because you know what? When I took ALA on its own, I was able to come up to 25 all of a sudden without the DMSA. So I might be able to bring the DMSA down, but I feel like when I take them together, they have to be in lower doses together than if they're taken solo.
So when you gave that first combo round to your
ALA.
nonverbal child, it was just like suddenly overnight reaction. They got better, started to speak.
By the end of the round, he just all of a sudden wanted to speak more. You know, words we hadn't heard before, or things that we had seen in the past that had disappeared, all of a sudden showed up again. And ALA has, like by itself, ALA has, I feel like slower gains just for us. Everybody's different. But when I am able to give a DMSA combo round, I don't do it to him every round because he doesn't like the taste of it. I give liquid ALA. That means DMSA goes in the mouth without a capsule, and it's not a good flavor. So I do it like once a month, and it's like explosive reactions between ALA solo and a combo.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a question for you, Sandra. This is a personal question. You know, I got this diagnosis of chronic leukemia.
Okay.
I started doing, yeah, I just been going to the Chinese traditional Chinese medicine doctor. He's going to put me on herbs. And apparently he's been treating people who've been on these herbs for 20 years and their doctors are surprised and so forth. So I'm going to do that. But, you know, I've been chelating, you know, I never thought about lead as a problem. For me, you know, I just did 100% lipoic acid, except at the very beginning. And, you know, like I'd done 10 years of lipoic acid. And then talking to Robert, you know, that interview I did with Robert when he was talking about how every time he needs to do a DMSA round, he stops being able to play the piano. And as soon as he does a round of DMSA, all of a sudden his piano skills come back. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to give this a whirl because, you know, like being able to concentrate and retain anything has been an issue for me. I thought, okay, let's try it. And I had some kind of immediate reactions to the first round of DMSA. I did 25 milligrams because I had 50s and I was dividing them in half, you know. And the first thing that happened is I got a frozen shoulder, which I haven't had for like 5 years, ever had a frozen shoulder and all kinds of strange things. And so I think I need to do it. I think it's worth doing for me. But the chronic leukemia is considered like an autoimmune disease some way.
Okay.
I don't know too much about it, except that I've got it. And like I was a little concerned about doing the DMSA for that reason. What do you think?
Just hearing the word leukemia, I'm thinking it has to do with the core of the long bones where blood cells are made, which
Never
is
thought of that.
where it is impacting things. When we're talking about lead can cause, you know, immune problems based on what kind of blood cells are being made, and it's precisely because of where it's stored. So
you think the lead might be implicated in the leukemia itself?
I would, you know what, I think I would probably use, maybe if you're the autoimmune part is, I would have to know more about the chronic leukemia and what you said about the autoimmune connection there. But the DMSA, what if you drop it to just 10 milligrams and keep your ALA at a comfortable for you dose and just do that weekly to minimize what you're giving as input of DMSA? Because remember, when we double a dose, we're not like doubling how much we're chelating. We're just quadrupling the side effects and then wonder, why am I feeling so crummy and picking up every bug sort of thing. You just keep that at a manageable dose and you base it on, okay, how am I feeling here? I mean, I think the
I can't
healthier I
say that I felt
the more
anything
attuned I
bad
am
from
to
it.
body signals.
I'm just sort of anxious about it, but I haven't, there hasn't, nothing
Right.
happened so hard except for getting like the aches and pains, which
Right. So how
might
could you find out more about the chronic leukemia, like the etiology, or how does this
right,
come
right,
about?
right.
What's the actual connection, the proposed mechanism, how this occurs? The other thing is lead with your generation. I think it's pretty much a given. I hate to say that. Like when people
Yeah,
talk
you
about,
said
oh, I
that.
have a gout attack or this or that, I'm like, that's caused by lead exposure all the way back to childhood. It
Yeah,
kind of haunts us. I mean, it ricochets throughout the ages, especially postmenopausal. Your bone density goes down, so you're just releasing a whole bunch
and
more blood
it's
into the
coming out.
system, but
Yeah,
it just
yeah.
cycles around. It cycles. Your body keeps taking it up because we're not actually we're not excreting it.
Just
We're
keeps
just
going round and round. We call it
recycling.
a constant source of exposure. Like Andy put
Mm-hmm.
it, it's just
And
like
these words, yep.
a recurring source of exposure. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's very interesting. I never thought about those white blood cells that are produced in the bone marrow, aren't they? Yeah, and the lead, that's where
Right.
it goes. Yeah, that's where it likes to be. Well, we're
Even
just
red blood cells. I
speculating
mean,
here, but still.
acute lead exposure causes anemia, so it's altering the blood chemistry, the blood composition, actually, the red and white blood cells. So leukemia, I'm thinking, is an excess of white ones.
What is the lead is very implicated in these digestive issues that we've been talking about today too. And what is the mechanism for that, as far as you know?
One of the direct effects it has is it slows peristalsis. So that alone favors dysbiosis, because if things aren't moving along at the needed pace, I
Mhm.
can see things just fermenting longer than they should and sitting in the gut longer than is good. The slow peristalsis also makes it's during exposure and years after exposure that the constipation you talked about for one of your kiddos, Brittany, it's like, yeah, it's a pure lead type of thing. Hypotonia, slow peristalsis, because it doesn't just affect the gut, it affects other muscles too. Slow
Mhm.
to react. I mean, it's literally, it's slowing down nerve transmissions. It's blocking. Lead goes where calcium docks and comes out of reaction type sites. So it just blocks and slows down. Like, oh, this muscle isn't moving. Lead is just sitting there blocking this, instead of, calcium docking and then
Doing it,
leaving. And
yeah, giving its messages and making things work.
same thing with mercury and zinc. They're directly blocking sites where, excuse me, other minerals should be interacting temporarily. Heavy metals can block things pretty permanently. Enzyme production. I mean, I don't know, all the different mechanisms it can. And then the fact alone, the gut lining is like the biggest interface we have with the outside world. And it's a direct immune system connection there too. So I think it's an interplay of, it's hitting in the bone marrow, it's hitting in the gut, where the immune system kind of starts, right? Where those cells first come in contact with things. So yeah.
There's a lot of lead around too. I mean, I just feel as though I'm living in a sea of it here in Burlington, Vermont, with all this old housing stock.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And I think it's an underappreciated public health risk. They've even done these studies of, oh, even if it's so expensive, so many billions to subsidize and replace old infrastructure, the benefit down the line would be so many billions saved per year, because we have less medical costs, we have less special education costs. And I'm like, the numbers are in favor of a big federal money influx, but the political will to actually act on this and reap the benefits down the line is not there. And I think that's atrocious. That is just like,
Well,
it's dysfunctional.
that
It is
said, I don't
dysfunctional.
know, the Department of Health here in Burlington or in Vermont gave me a
Grant.
$30,000 grant to de-lead this building when my brother owned it. And then they came in with another 10,000 to take the asbestos out of the basement. So you can get money to do this. You just have to poke around and find
Right. And there were money set aside with the, what do they call it? The, shoot, not against inflation, but whatever the big legislation was last year, was a big package. And in there was some lead
money for
infrastructure
lead. Wow.
subsidies for that. But it's only a portion of the cost that states and municipalities, I think it was given to the state level and then they portion it out further. But it only kind of kickstarted something. I read a little thing about Wisconsin, and where they're like, okay, this amount of money, like it sounds like a lot, right? Thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's a tiny portion of what this is going to cost if you do this on a large scale. But all the children affected by these water service lines, it's not just in your home, it's water service lines underground throughout the community. It's all of it combined. We can lower the risk. It's just, do we want to? Politically speaking, people are more worried about guns or this or that war. It's like,
yeah. I'd like to get one of those peace dividends or get all the lead out of the houses.
Oh, I love that. Yes, we do get one. That is a peace dividend. There was this,
It would be
oh,
more peaceful since the lead makes people crazy and violent.
The criminal element, isn't that what the Mother Jones article was called? It's a really long article that details.
I've read it several times. Yeah. It's an
Mhm.
article in Mother Jones about
mental health would
20
improve.
years ago about mental health and our criminals and exposure to lead. Yeah. Yeah. I can see it. I mean, I can like Andy used to say, when you're poisoned with mercury, you can tell a mercury toxic person across the crowded room, they're like radiating their like eccentricity, like all over the place. But the lead toxic people, I'm starting to be able to sense what that looks like too. And I got to thank Lead Safe Mama there for that movie she made, and she showed her kids. And I got a good idea of what a lead toxic kid looks like. Yeah, what it feels like. It's really kind of visceral. You feel it. Yeah. Well, I think this has been, we've covered a lot of ground here. It's been a really great discussion, and I want to thank both of you. And I hope this gets out there and a lot of people see it. Yeah. So is there anything either of you would like to add? Like Brittany, you got anything you'd like to say here? We started off with the gut problems and diet. We didn't say anything about diet. We never got into the diet. We can do diet next week.
And I think it's very tailored to people. We can't just say this one food is good.
Right, that's
like
exactly
something like, low glycemic index is good for people dealing with yeast and adrenal both. It just slows down, you don't have the peaks and valleys, and it minimizes maybe some of the yeast stuff. And I will give a plug to Alan Downey. He loves ginger tea. I made ginger tea this morning. We finally had some cooler days here. And I'm like, oh, I can have some ginger tea. And it's good for the tummy. That's why I brought it up right now. Like it helps. It can settle an upset stomach. It increases your stomach acid production. So if somebody has low stomach acid, it's something they can have before a meal and, help that.
Got the fridge full of ginger. Well, our Jamaican, I make these Jamaican gingerbreads for the Jamaican diaspora here that I deal with, and they're called bullas, and takes a quarter a cup of fresh ginger and 3 tablespoons of ground ginger. But I can't eat those things. If I eat one of them, it's indigestion city for 3 days. Like those guys, they're healthy as horses, and they love it and they gobble it down. Yeah. Yeah.
I may want a recipe for that. That sounds cool.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Oh, you just look it up on Google. It's right there. There's a lot of recipes. Bullas, yeah, yeah. And they're
Should
supposed
make
to be
it.
hard. Like if I tried to improve on the recipe and make them kind of soft and chewy, and nope, they're supposed to be hard damn things, you know. So,
Is it similar to, have you heard of speculatius? It's a thin, dry cookie. Christmas
yeah,
time
no, it's not.
spice cookie.
These are like cakes, but they're
Oh
supposed
wow.
to be kind of tough.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've been
Is
told to turn off the oven and leave them in there to dry out. So that's what I did. And they came out this morning, you know, like really dry
that's
and
how they like it.
they seemed my husband seemed pleased and took them off to share with his friends at work. Yeah,
That's cool.
yeah. Well, okay. Brittany, what have you got anything to add here before
I
we?
don't think so.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, let's say goodbye then, and I guess we'll meet again next week. I'm going to turn this off.